We have here a 2011 Volkswagen Jetta, and it is a 2-liter TDI, and the customer's complaint is that it won't start. Now the customer scanned it himself and he said he had some low fuel pressure trouble codes. He didn't write the numbers down, but we can scan those ourselves and get those codes, but we're going to try and figure out what it needs. We'll scan it first. Well, first of all, let me show you that it won't start. I'm not going to crank it very long because in the off chance it's lost prime or it's out of fuel or something, we'd be running the high pressure fuel pump with no diesel fuel in it, and that's pretty hard on them. So we'll show you that it won't start, and then we will scan it for trouble codes. Turn the dash lights on so you can kind of see that. Obviously it's not starting. I'm not going to crank the hell out of it in order to try and make it start. We'll figure out what it needs and then make it start after we know the fuel pump has pressure going to it. I suppose the first thing we should mention here is that it looks like the fuel tank is full. Guess that reminds me we should probably check that it doesn't have gasoline in it. We'll pop the tank here. Can't see anything, it's so dark. Oh, this one doesn't have a tank popper. Yeah, this one don't have a tank popper. Diesel fuel only, folks. Don't put gasoline in there. Can you smell anything? I don't smell any gasoline. Okay, we're scanning the engine computer for trouble codes. And no codes. Now the customer told me it had low fuel pressure trouble codes, and that's very frustrating because he's literally cleared them and cheated me out of getting that information. Now I don't have any idea what codes it has. Obviously I can assume, you know, these things do have high pressure fuel pump failure, and that's the first thing that comes to mind when somebody says low fuel pressure codes to me. So we're going to make the quick checks in order to determine whether that's the problem or not. The high pressure fuel pump, when it fails, it makes metal, and that metal ends up in the control solenoid and in the injectors and in the fuel tank and in the fuel filter, ends up everywhere. So we'll make those checks first. Alright, we're going to pull the fuel filter off first. See if there's any metal in there. Okay, I'm going to zoom in. We're looking for sparklies on top of the fuel filter. I don't know if you can see that, but there's just the barest little bit of shiny material on top of there. I've definitely seen worse than that, but we're going to pull this out and see if there's any metal particles in there. I don't know how well you're seeing that, but there is absolutely no metal on that screen. I don't see any metal inside the hole, so it looks like we need to look elsewhere. What I've done is I've hooked this T-in line between this pump and the high pressure fuel pump to measure the pressure that's coming out of this pump right here. Alright, there I found a nice place to tuck that where we can see it. Okay, so about 10 psi, that seems normal. It might have, I'll go see if I can look up and find the specifications. I know the older ones, like an 06 Jetta, the supply pump would feed about 10 psi to it, but I don't think I've ever specifically looked up one of this generation. Okay, I went to look up the specification for pressure and we got interrupted, had to move the car to get another car out. But anyway, I'm back on it. I couldn't find a specification for pressure in our technical information. It does show a specification for flow, so I think what I'm going to do is disconnect the fuel line and try and start the car and see what kind of flow I get. So what I've done is I've routed the fuel line into this water bottle here, and we'll measure how much flow comes out of it. And I've decided to turn on the basic settings test that activates the fuel pump. And we use that procedure all the time to prime fuel filters, but it'll be very helpful in this diagnosis. If we turn that on, we can see how much the fuel pump is flowing. Okay, the key is on. Scanning the computer. Go to basic settings, and the drop-down box should give us fuel pump supply activation. Can you see that okay? And when I click this on button here, we should be able to hear the fuel pumps run. A little bit hard to see in there, but fuel is coming out of it. Certainly not very much. I'm having trouble finding you here. See how little is coming out of there? I mean, that is just not enough. It is supplying it with fuel, but that is not enough. I better hurry and shut this thing off before this bottle overflows. Okay, so pretty obviously we have a fuel supply problem, but is the problem this pump, or is the problem the pump in the tank? So I'm going to disconnect this line right here, and that's the one coming from the tank, and see if it has the correct flow coming out of it. Alright, I'm going to turn on the basic settings fuel supply pump activation. Alright, now I don't know if you can see that, but that is a massive quantity of better. Better shut that off real quick. Okay, you see that thing filled up that bottle super quick, overflowed it even. Should have done a better job. Wasn't expecting that, by the way. Okay, I'm going to hook this back up. So we know our rear pump is pumping good and our front pump is not, but we're going to have to check powers and grounds to it. Don't know if there's a relay that controls it. Guess it's possible. And honestly, I probably should have, while I was running that test, put my hand on it to see if the pump was even running, but I didn't. I did hear a pump running, but it could have just been the pump in the rear. course, it is possible the electric motor part of the pump is working and the pump itself is not. But we'll find that out here. Well, I grabbed my meter in order to do power and ground checks, but then I saw this. Probably should have looked closer. There's the connector, and the weather-tight seal that's supposed to be in there is pulled up out of there. Now, I think that probably means we might have found our problem. Let me get this thing unplugged. A lot easier. As I'm trying to unplug this, I'm realizing this wire just moves right in and out. So I think we might have found our problem here. Let me get this unplugged and I'll reseat that. Now these little tabs right here are what holds this connector inside the plastic housing. So I'll just pry these up some and hopefully it'll stay in. I don't know how this thing came out. This pump's generally removed during a timing belt job. Let me go check the mileage on this thing, see if this thing's had a timing belt yet. The mileage is at 133, so it might have had a timing belt at 120 like it was supposed to. So this problem could have been induced by whoever unplugged this. They might have pulled on this wire and had it come up and out some. Might have got it. Yeah, it seems like it's latched in there. Pushing in just a little bit more and tugging on it. Now I'll shove that seal in there the rest of the way. Plug that in right there and continue working the seal down in place. Got it. Now I'll hook everything back up and see if it starts. I do find it a little strange that this didn't have a trouble code for that fuel pump. I suppose maybe it's controlled by a relay and the computer would only trigger a trouble code for that relay if that relay was unplugged. Maybe, but obviously it will cause low fuel pressure. And the computer can see that low fuel pressure on this fuel sensor right there. Is when the high pressure fuel pump gets starved by the two low pressure fuel pumps, then the high pressure fuel pump can't supply enough pressure. Alright, I think I'm going to run the basic settings test for fuel supply pump activation a couple times, and then I will try and start it, because I don't want to run that high pressure fuel pump dry. Oh yeah, I can hear that pump running. I'm pretty sure I wasn't hearing that running before. Don't know if you can hear that from there on camera. That thing's definitely running now. I think if I'd have done a little bit better job, I would have put my hand on it and known it wasn't running and went right to the problem. Notice a little mistake on my part there. I put that clamp on there when I should have put that clamp on there. I'll have to fix that. I'll wait till after I verify it starts though. I don't know if you could hear that or not, but the pump just shut off. I'm going to run that pump supply activation basic setting one more time, and then I'll try and start it for you. Do I have wishful thinking, or is it going to start? I think I'll just leave the camera right here and see if it starts up. Well, I'll do a little bit of cleaning, take it for a short road test, and let you know how it turns out. I just got back from the road test on this 2011 Jetta, and everything ran good. No check engine light popped on or anything. And in my mind, I'm reviewing my diagnostic process. My diagnostic process wasn't terrible, but it could have been much better. Number one, a better visual inspection. If I would have looked it over real good, as soon as I started thinking fuel supply problem, if I'd have looked it over real good, I would have saw that insulator up out of that wire, and I should have noticed that, and that should have kept. Secondly, when I ran the fuel supply pump activation in basic settings, I should have heard that that fuel pump wasn't running. Now I do this enough to where I should know better, but I heard the fuel pump back there running, and honestly, we change these fuel filters all the time, and a lot of times when I do that fuel pump supply activation basic settings test, I'll walk out and put my hand on the pump just to make sure it's running. You know, shop environment's noisy and stuff like that. So the two things I really could have done better is notice the seal up on a good visual inspection, and number two, notice that pump wasn't running. That would have really made this diagnosis faster. Not that it took that long after I really got on the car and really started looking at it. Now, this customer is lucky. He does not have a high pressure fuel pump failure. If you have a high pressure fuel pump failure, you better hope it's under warranty. Expensive, clogs the injectors. When Volkswagen first started repairing these, they were changing every part that touches fuel, including the fuel tank, the two electric fuel pumps, all the fuel lines to the injectors, the fuel rail that the high pressure sensor goes in, the injectors themselves. That gets to be real expensive. And the reason they're doing that is because even one speck of metal that sticks open the injector will make a streaming injector, and that can melt down a piston or melt down the head. But if you learned anything from this video, despite my poor diagnostic process, if you learned anything from this video, click the like button. And if you'd like to donate to the continued production of these videos, visit my website at www.kansascitytdi.com and find the donate icon. And if you want to watch some more TDI related videos, try that one right there, or maybe this one right here, and don't forget to subscribe.